Awaken your spirit, chosen ones. Some people don't want to understand you. They want to survive you. It sounds dramatic, right? But the truth is, not everyone who studies you is a student. Some are investigators on a mission to solve what was never meant to be decoded. You see, human beings have an obsession with what they can't define. It's why we chase UFOs, argue about black holes, and still don't know how our own minds fully work. But when that same curiosity meets you, a chosen soul wrapped in divine mystery, it becomes fatal. There's something unnerving about you lately, isn't there? Your presence doesn't just enter a room, it interrogates it. People feel exposed in your silence, like your very stillness is reading their secrets. They laugh around you, but glance twice when you walk away, and deep down they're thinking, what is it about this person? Unaware that what they're feeling isn't confusion, it's confrontation. You're not complicated, you're calibrated differently. Now here's the funny part. Some folks think they can figure you out like a Wi-Fi password. They analyze your every move, zoom into your photos, and try to predict your next phase as if your life runs on a pattern. But what they don't realize is that your spirit doesn't move in logic, it moves in divine timing. Trying to decipher you is like trying to download a lightning bolt. Good luck, you'll crash the system. You've probably noticed it too, how their curiosity keeps turning into obsession. The late-night texts disguised as just checking in, the social media lurking, the random questions that sound innocent but are really spiritual surveillance. What they don't understand is that your energy doesn't give answers, it gives awakenings. And awakenings can break people who aren't ready to evolve. So yes, chosen one, this is wild, but someone literally lost themselves trying to study you, chase you, expose you, or explain you. They wanted to figure you out, but your design wasn't made for understanding. It was made for revelation. You were never meant to make sense, you were meant to make impact. And those who approach divine fire with ego instead of reverence, they always end up burned. Now sit tight, because what we're about to unpack next isn't just spiritual. It's psychological, raw, and painfully real. Let's talk about what really happens when someone underestimates a mystery that was crafted by the divine. Number 1, people get addicted to the mystery. They can't solve. There's something magnetic about what can't be understood. The human mind is wired to chase answers, to close loops, to label what feels uncertain. But when someone like you walks in, calm, unreadable, unbothered, you disturb that balance. You become an unsolved riddle that keeps echoing in their thoughts long after you're gone. They replay conversations, dissect your tone, and try to decode your silence like it's a secret language. What they don't realize is that your mystery isn't a game. It's protection. You don't hide because you're scared. You stay quiet because you're aware. People aren't used to energy they can't manipulate. They're used to predicting reactions, pulling emotional strings, and knowing how to get under someone's skin. But when they meet someone who doesn't take the bait, who observes instead of reacts, their ego panics. Suddenly, they're not in control. So they dig deeper, desperate to understand what makes you so calm while their spirit feels exposed. That curiosity quickly turns into obsession. It's not even about you anymore. It's about the discomfort you triggered in them. You became the mirror, showing them everything they don't understand about themselves. The irony is that the more they try to figure you out, the more lost they become. Because your peace isn't a strategy, it's alignment. Your unpredictability isn't a mystery, it's authenticity. You're not following a script they can read. You're following intuition they don't have access to. That's what drives them mad. They can't study something that was never meant to fit their logic. And in that frustration, they lose themselves. They start questioning their own instincts, doubting their perception, and replaying every interaction until they spiral. All because they tried to analyze what was meant to be respected. Your mystery was never meant to be solved. It was meant to be sensed. But for those who lack spiritual maturity, mystery feels like danger, and their curiosity becomes the very trap that consumes them. Number 2, your energy was a mirror. They couldn't bear to look into. You didn't have to expose anyone. Your energy did it for you. Some people walked into your presence thinking they were about to figure you out, only to end up confronting themselves. You carry a kind of energy that doesn't need to speak. It reflects. It makes people see who they really are, not who they pretend to be. And for some, that reflection is unbearable. It's easy to hide behind charm, gossip, or false confidence until they meet someone whose peace, focus, and authenticity quietly call out their lies. You didn't judge them. Your energy just didn't participate in their illusion. What made it worse for them was that you never needed to clap back, explain yourself, or prove anything. That kind of self-assurance unsettles people who survive on external validation. They mistook your stillness for arrogance because they couldn't comprehend that it came from self-awareness. You became a living contradiction to their insecurities. Every time you walked in, they felt small without you ever trying to make them feel that way. That's the power of energy that's rooted. It doesn't compete. It just reveals. And once someone sees their own emptiness in your presence, they either grow or they crumble. Sadly, most choose to crumble. They start resenting you, gossiping about you, or acting like you think you're better than them, when deep down, they're just uncomfortable facing their own reflection. It's not your fault. They just didn't expect you to hold up the mirror so effortlessly. The truth is, your energy never lies. It filters people without trying. The ones who can handle truth will feel peace around you, and the ones who can't will feel attacked, even when you say nothing. That's why some people fell apart trying to figure you out. They weren't trying to understand you. They were trying to escape the parts of themselves that your presence silently exposed. And in the process, they lost themselves in the reflection they refused to heal. Number 3, they studied you like a code, forgetting you were a soul. Some people approached you like a problem to solve, a pattern to decode, or a system to hack. They treated your life like a puzzle game, thinking that if they observed enough, asked enough questions, or analyzed every word, they could predict your next move. But what they didn't understand is that you're not a pattern, you're not a formula, and you're certainly not a project. You are a soul moving through existence on a level they can't measure. Their obsession with figuring you out blinded them to the truth. You can't be contained by logic, explained by curiosity, or reduced to comprehension. They dissected your words, studied your gestures, and tried to map your routines, believing that every silence or smile was a hint. Every pause, every glance, every moment of stillness was overanalyzed as if you were an algorithm waiting to be solved. The irony is, while they were busy constructing theories about you, they completely ignored the essence of what made you untouchable, the depth of your awareness and the freedom of your spirit. You weren't behaving mysteriously on purpose. You were living authentically, without bending to their need to control or understand. In their mind, the closer they got, the safer they felt. But the closer they got, the more they realized they were chasing something beyond their reach. And the harder they chased, the more they became lost. Their obsession became a trap because they were attempting to engage with a reality that doesn't operate under human rules. A soul aligned with purpose cannot be predicted, cannot be measured, and cannot be possessed. They failed to see that the real secret wasn't in your actions, but in your existence, calm, centered, and untouchable. You weren't meant to be solved or cracked. You were meant to inspire awareness, provoke reflection, and expose unhealed parts of those who tried too hard. The tragedy isn't that they couldn't understand you. It's that their fixation on understanding consumed them, leaving them lost in a pursuit that could never be won. Number 4. Their obsession with understanding. You revealed their insecurity. Some people can't stand what they can't predict. When they met you, they thought you'd fit into the same emotional patterns they were used to manipulating. But your presence didn't respond to their games. It disarmed them. You weren't moved by flattery, guilt, or pressure. You didn't chase, explain, or react. And that's what terrified them. It wasn't that you were mysterious, it was that you were free. And freedom unsettles people who live through control. Your unpredictability didn't come from ego, it came from alignment. You were being guided by something higher, something they couldn't influence, and that exposed how powerless they really were beneath their confident surface. Their obsession with figuring you out came from fear. Fear of being out of control, fear of losing emotional dominance, fear of realizing that your peace wasn't something they could buy, charm, or manipulate. They wanted to understand you, not out of curiosity, but because understanding meant having power. When that failed, the insecurity kicked in. They started questioning what made you so composed, so sure, so untouched by chaos. They labeled your calmness as coldness, your boundaries as pride, your silence as rejection. But none of that was true. You were simply no longer playing in their emotional sandbox. Your energy exposed how dependent they were on control. They thrived on reactions, anger, confusion, validation, anything that made them feel important. But your detachment starved that need. You showed them that real power doesn't scream or demand attention. It just is. And that revelation was unbearable for someone whose identity depends on being in charge. They didn't hate you because of who you were. They hated how they felt around you, powerless, transparent, and small. You triggered the truth they'd buried for years. Their confidence was a mask, and your authenticity tore it off. They confused your stability for danger because to an unhealed soul, peace feels like threat. You weren't their enemy. You were their exposure. Number 5. They wanted access without transformation. People are always drawn to what feels powerful, magnetic, or different, but they rarely consider the cost of being close to it. They see the glow, the confidence, the grace that follows you, and they want in. They want to be around you, learn your secrets, share your space, and absorb your energy. But what they don't realize is that your presence comes with a price: truth. And truth exposes everything that isn't real. That's where most people fail. They want to connect with you without confronting themselves. They crave access to your peace but resist the purification it demands. Your energy doesn't just comfort, it corrects. It doesn't flatter egos, it reveals motives. The moment people step too close without alignment, their unhealed parts start surfacing. Their jealousy, deceit, insecurities, and hidden agendas rise to the surface like dust caught in sunlight. They mistake that discomfort for you being too intense, when in reality, their spirit is just reacting to purity. You didn't curse them. Your vibration simply exposed their contradictions. Everyone says they want to walk with the chosen until the energy starts stripping away their masks. They thought being close to you would bring blessings, but they didn't realize blessings demand responsibility. The frequency you operate in doesn't tolerate pretense. It's not a social club, it's a spiritual environment. You can't fake humility, loyalty, or growth in that atmosphere and expect to survive. They wanted your light without letting go of their shadows. They wanted your wisdom without doing the inner work. The truth is, your aura was never just a vibe. It was a test, a quiet but powerful filter that separates those ready for elevation from those addicted to comfort. The ones who couldn't handle it walked away confused or bitter, not realizing they failed an initiation they didn't even know they were in. You didn't reject them. Their resistance to transformation did. That's why being connected to you isn't easy. Because your energy doesn't entertain comfort zones, it destroys them. Number 6. You didn't destroy them, their curiosity did. Some people wandered into your life not out of love, but out of curiosity. They wanted to know what made you different, what made your presence feel heavy yet peaceful, intimidating yet magnetic. But curiosity without preparation is dangerous. They approached your energy like tourists in sacred territory, fascinated, careless, and unaware of the spiritual voltage they were about to touch. You didn't harm them. You simply existed in truth, and that truth was too unfiltered for their ego to survive. Your energy carries weight, the kind that exposes pretenders and tests intentions. When they got close, their masks started slipping. Their insecurities rose, their shadows flared up, and the control they once had over others didn't work on you. They mistook your calmness for weakness, thinking they could decode or dominate it. But your spirit wasn't something to manage, it was something to respect. Their curiosity made them cross boundaries their soul wasn't equipped to handle. And when they tried to handle divine frequency with human arrogance, it short-circuited their peace. You didn't need to say a word. Your silence alone confronted them. The truth is, your energy acts like spiritual electricity. It amplifies whatever's within a person. For the pure-hearted, it brings peace. For the deceitful, it brings chaos. The same fire that warms one soul can burn another, depending on how they approach it. They touched what wasn't meant to be touched carelessly, and the backlash wasn't punishment. It was revelation. Their downfall wasn't your doing. It was their refusal to respect divine order. They tried to analyze what was meant to be honored, to study what was meant to be experienced. And that's what destroyed them. They confused proximity with permission, and when they reached too far, the energy responded. You weren't the weapon, you were the warning. The fire didn't burn them out of malice. It burned to remind them that not every light is meant to be touched. Number 7. You were sent as a reminder, not a relationship. Some souls crossed your path not to stay, but to awaken. You weren't placed in their life for comfort. You were there for correction. You were a divine interruption, a mirror sent to show them what they'd forgotten, neglected, or refused to see. But the human heart loves to hold on to what was only meant to pass through. They felt something deep in your presence, clarity, conviction, maybe even peace. And instead of recognizing it as a divine nudge, they mistook it for chemistry. What was supposed to teach them ended up consuming them. Your purpose in their story was never about attachment. It was about alignment. You entered at a point in their life when they needed a wake-up call. Someone who embodied truth without speaking it. Someone whose very existence revealed what real connection feels like. But when people are starved for authenticity, they confuse spiritual encounters for romantic ones. They didn't want to learn. They wanted to own. They tried to hold on to what was never meant to belong to them. The connection was never ordinary. It carried a kind of weight that made them question everything, but instead of evolving, they tried to possess it. They mistook the divine charge between you for something emotional when it was really spiritual. And because they approached a sacred encounter with a selfish mindset, they corrupted it. That's why the relationship crumbled. It wasn't rejection, it was redirection. They couldn't see that the end wasn't punishment. It was purpose fulfilled. You didn't come to complete them. You came to remind them. To remind them of self-worth, of alignment, of the kind of love that heals instead of drains. Once that lesson was delivered, your spirit had to move on, because chosen ones don't cling. They close divine assignments. You weren't their person, you were their awakening, and awakenings never stay to be adored, they stay just long enough to transform. Number 8. You're the storm. They thought was a season. They thought your presence was temporary, something they could recover from, like a phase or a fling. They told themselves they'd get over you. But how do you get over something that didn't just touch your life but reshaped it? You weren't a chapter in their story, you were the rewrite. You didn't just arrive, you interrupted. You didn't bring calm seas or predictable waves, you brought truth, and truth doesn't whisper. It crashes. What they mistook for a passing experience was actually a divine confrontation. You didn't come to entertain, you came to expose. When they met you, they thought they were ready for depth, but depth has a cost. It asks for honesty, vulnerability, and emotional maturity, things most people only pretend to have. You didn't drown them in love, they drowned in their own unresolved chaos. Your energy demanded realness, and realness terrifies those still hiding behind illusions. Every conversation, every moment with you peeled back another layer they weren't ready to face. They mistook that intensity for danger because they weren't used to someone who didn't play along with the shallow. You were never meant to be gentle. You were meant to be transformative. And transformation always comes with storms. Your presence stirred things inside them that had been dormant for years. Insecurities, regrets, forgotten dreams. But instead of rising to meet that change, they resisted it. They tried to treat you like a season that would fade, but you left marks that time can't erase. You didn't ruin them, you revealed them. The truth is, you were the lesson they didn't know they needed. A storm disguised as a person, not to destroy, but to cleanse. You came to wash away the illusions they built and show them who they really were beneath it all. They'll call you chaos, but years from now, they'll realize you were clarity, the one moment in their life when everything false got stripped away. You weren't passing through. You were passing judgment on everything in them that couldn't survive truth. Number 9. They mistook your stillness for weakness and your distance for ego. People often misunderstand what they can't interpret. When you started pulling back, they assumed you were being cold, prideful, or detached. But they never stopped to think that your distance wasn't rejection, it was mercy. You weren't avoiding them out of bitterness. You were protecting both yourself and them from an energetic clash they weren't evolved enough to handle. You had already outgrown certain conversations, habits, and frequencies. To stay connected to what no longer matched your vibration would have been spiritual self-sabotage. So, you chose peace over proximity, and that choice offended people who confused access with importance. Your stillness made them uncomfortable because they were used to chaos. They couldn't understand how you could stay calm while everything around you shifted. They called you emotionless, when in truth you'd simply mastered emotional discipline. You no longer reacted, you responded. You no longer fought battles that didn't align with your purpose. But to those still operating in survival mode, your peace looked like arrogance. They mistook your self-control for distance, not realizing that silence is a language only evolved spirits understand. You were never trying to prove superiority, you were maintaining balance. There's a kind of energy that doesn't mix easily with confusion, envy, or immaturity. And your presence, as grounded as it was, exposed those things in others. To the unhealed, that exposure feels like punishment. They started feeling uneasy around you, not because you judged them, but because your frequency demanded honesty. Your silence echoed louder than their noise, and that scared them. They'll tell people you changed, but you didn't. You simply stopped explaining your peace to those who thrive on misunderstanding. You were never being distant out of ego. You were being protective out of wisdom. You knew that your energy isn't for everyone, and giving it to the wrong people isn't humility. It's harm. Some connections aren't meant to be broken out of anger, but out of awareness, and yours was one of them. Number 10. Their ego wanted to outshine what was meant to be observed. Some people can't stand to simply witness greatness. They feel an uncontrollable urge to compete with it. When they met you, your confidence was quiet, but undeniable. You didn't need validation, attention, or a crowd to feel significant. That kind of authenticity is rare, and it unsettled them. Instead of letting your light inspire them, they felt threatened by it. They wanted to outshine you, not realizing that you weren't even playing the same game. You were becoming, evolving, aligning, while they were performing. You weren't chasing attention, you were embodying purpose. And purpose has a glow that no spotlight can imitate. Their ego couldn't handle that. They wanted to prove they could do what you do, talk like you, move like you, attract what you attract. But what they didn't understand is that energy can't be copied. You can mimic a style, but you can't duplicate an anointing. You carried something beyond personality. You carried presence. And presence can't be rehearsed. Instead of learning from your example, they tried to compete with your essence, and in that competition they lost themselves. The irony is, you were never against them. You weren't in rivalry, you were in revelation. But ego doesn't know how to observe without comparing. They didn't see you as a mirror. They saw you as a threat. Their need to be seen, to be better, to be the center, made them sabotage what could have been a blessing. You were sent as a reminder that humility is power, but they turned it into a contest. And when ego fights authenticity, peace is always the casualty. They tried to dismantle you through gossip, manipulation, or envy, not realizing that your strength came from a source they couldn't touch. In trying to compete with what was meant to be respected, they destroyed their own stability. Their downfall wasn't because you shined too bright. It was because they couldn't stand to see a light that revealed how dim theirs truly was. Number 11. You exposed the spiritual weight of superficiality. Your presence didn't just walk into rooms, it shifted them. Without saying much, you revealed what people were really built on. The ones who pretended to be confident suddenly felt insecure. The ones who relied on image rather than essence began to fidget. It wasn't because you tried to outshine them. It was because your authenticity made their performance collapse. You showed them without effort how heavy it is to live pretending. They wanted to look powerful, not be powerful. And that difference is what separated you from them. You didn't come with glitter or noise. You came with groundedness. And that groundedness exposed everything hollow. When people's identities are built on validation and applause, realness feels like rejection. Your calmness made their need for attention look desperate. Your self-awareness made their facades look fragile. Suddenly the things they bragged about, money, looks, followers, popularity, felt small next to your peace. Because peace, unlike performance, can't be faked. They couldn't understand how you carried so much power without showing off. They mistook simplicity for lack, when in reality it was strength. You didn't need to announce who you were. Your energy did that quietly. And that quiet truth made people uncomfortable, because it revealed how much of their worth depended on appearance. They weren't ready to admit that their strength was an act. You didn't humiliate them. You just existed authentically, and that alone was enough to convict them. Superficial energy always collapses in the presence of realness. You became the mirror that showed them how exhausting it is to fake confidence while starving for inner peace. They wore crowns of ego, but your humility weighed more than their pride ever could. Your existence forced them to see that being seen and being centered are not the same thing. You didn't expose them with words, your spirit did. And for those who built their identity on illusions, that exposure was too heavy to carry. Number 12. Their curiosity became a curse, because it was rooted in envy. Some people don't approach greatness with admiration. They approach it with a hunger to possess. They didn't seek to understand you. They wanted to be you. Every glance, every question, every attempt to decode your life was driven not by respect or curiosity, but by envy. They wanted your aura, your confidence, your calm, without putting in the work to earn it. They thought they could steal the energy, copy the habits, or mimic the essence without facing the responsibility that comes with it. What they didn't realize is that energy, like power, is never neutral. It demands alignment, discipline, and purpose. Borrow it without understanding, and it becomes a curse. They tried to replicate your presence, your grace, your focus, your detachment, but imitation is never enough. Energy can't be cloned, and authenticity can't be faked. In trying to possess what wasn't theirs, they awakened consequences they couldn't handle. Their obsession, rooted in jealousy, pushed them further from peace instead of closer to it. They thought proximity could shortcut growth, but it only exposed the gaps in their character. They weren't ready to carry what they coveted. They weren't prepared for the weight of your alignment, the discipline of your calm, or the responsibility of your truth. The tragedy of envy is that it blinds people to their own life. Instead of focusing on their evolution, they fixate on yours. They confuse admiration with entitlement and end up sabotaging themselves. Energy borrowed without purpose doesn't just fail to empower. It eats away at the borrower. You didn't have to act against them. The natural law of vibration did it for you. Their desire to be you became the trap that destroyed their clarity, their focus, and sometimes even their peace. In the end, you weren't the problem. The problem was their envy disguised as curiosity. They mistook observation for opportunity, and in trying to possess what was sacred, they only revealed how unprepared they were for what they truly wanted. Number 13. Your mystery activated their madness. Some people can't stand what they can't label. When they met you, they felt something they couldn't define, an energy that unsettled their comfort zone and questioned their understanding of how people are supposed to be. You didn't fit the molds they relied on to feel safe. You were too calm to be predictable, too wise to be manipulated, too grounded to be controlled. And that terrified them. What their mind couldn't categorize, their ego called danger. You weren't mysterious. You were divine. But to those who only know chaos, divinity feels threatening. They wanted logic to explain your intuition, proof to validate your peace, and reasons for your resilience. When they couldn't find any, their minds began to twist. Confusion turned into obsession, and fascination became fixation. They tried to reason their way through your spirit, dissecting your every word, searching your actions for meaning, trying to make sense of the unexplainable. But the more they searched, the deeper they fell into frustration. Because what flows from divine alignment doesn't obey human logic. You were never meant to be understood, only witnessed. To them, your unpredictability looked like manipulation, when in truth it was mastery. You moved differently because you were different. You weren't following emotion. You were following guidance. And that level of spiritual intelligence exposed how shallow their own thinking was. So they lashed out. They called you strange, cold, or detached. Anything to convince themselves that your peace was a flaw instead of a frequency. But deep down, they knew the truth. Your stillness made their noise unbearable. You didn't drive them mad. Their resistance to truth did. Your mystery wasn't a performance. It was purity wrapped in patience. Some souls simply can't coexist with what reminds them of everything they're not ready to face. You were the divine riddle their ego couldn't solve, the calm that made their chaos echo louder. In the end, your existence didn't break them. Their own refusal to evolve did. Number 14. You're the proof that light can be deadly to the unhealed. Your presence was never destructive. It was revealing. But to people still hiding behind illusions, revelation feels like ruin. You didn't harm them. You simply showed them. You carried a kind of light that didn't flatter the false. It exposed it. And exposure hurts those who've built their identity around pretending. When someone has lived too long in shadows, even gentle light feels violent. It burns away their comfort, their excuses, their masks. That's why they said you changed. You didn't change. They were just finally seeing you clearly, and in that clarity, their own distortions came undone. Your energy didn't attack. It amplified. It made people hear their own insecurities louder, feel their intentions more sharply, and face the truth they'd been avoiding. You became the living consequence of their dishonesty, not through words, but through vibration. Wherever you went, authenticity became the standard, and anything less started to crumble. That's why some people couldn't stay near you for long. Your presence demanded growth, and growth feels like pain to those still attached to pretense. They mistook that discomfort for danger, not realizing it was cleansing. But to the unhealed, cleansing feels like punishment. You didn't destroy their peace. You destroyed their illusions. You didn't break their hearts. You broke their denial. Your very existence challenged the lies they told themselves to survive. And when their ego couldn't survive the light, it called you toxic, when in truth, you were the cure. You are proof that light, though loving, is not always soft. Sometimes it exposes, sometimes it burns, and sometimes it ends what was never real to begin with. That's the cost of being illuminated. You don't just brighten spaces, you reveal what's been hiding in the dark. They thought you ended them, but all you did was uncover what was already collapsing. Light doesn't kill the unhealed. It just makes it impossible for them to keep pretending they're whole. Conclusion. In the end, being the chosen one isn't about being understood, controlled, or contained. It's about being aligned, authentic, and unshakable. A force that moves beyond the limitations of ordinary perception. Every encounter, every glance, every ripple your presence creates carries a weight that some souls are not prepared to carry. People may try to study you, imitate you, possess you, or compete with you, but your energy is never theirs to command. It isn't meant to be figured out. It's meant to be respected, witnessed, and, for those ready, learned from. You are the mirror that exposes unhealed patterns, the storm that dismantles illusion, and the light that burns away pretense. Some people will crumble in your presence not because you harmed them, but because your authenticity forces them to confront the parts of themselves they've been hiding. Your stillness isn't weakness, your distance isn't ego, and your mystery isn't arrogance. It's sovereignty. And sovereignty, for those unprepared to recognize it, can feel threatening, even dangerous. The truth is brutal. The energy you carry reveals what's fake, what's shallow, and what's unresolved. And sometimes revelation feels like chaos to the unready, yet through it all, your purpose remains untouchable. You weren't sent to please, to perform, or to be contained. You were sent to remind, to awaken, and to elevate. Some people will leave exhausted, confused, or even broken, not because you destroyed them, but because they weren't ready to hold space for a force like yours. And that's not failure on your part. That's the natural law of energy at work. Chosen ones aren't meant to shrink, apologize, or dilute themselves to make others comfortable. You shine, and in your shine, the unhealed either evolve or step aside. If you've felt this energy resonate with you, if this message hit deep, and if you're ready to walk in your own alignment without apology, then take it a step further. Subscribe to the channel to never miss a moment of insight. Like this video to honor the truth in it. Comment below with your experience or thoughts, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. The world needs more clarity, more awareness, and more people ready to hold their light unapologetically, just like you. Your journey isn't about being understood, it's about being unstoppable. And the ones who are ready will rise with you. Stay awakened, chosen ones.